Versus an Israel-Gaza update, I want to give a recap of what I've posted so far. It's Saturday, November 11th, 2023, and one of the first things that I posted was that Israel would call up reservists. I posted that Israel would strengthen the naval blockade that has been in place for years. I predicted Israel would conduct airstrikes for a couple of weeks. Israel will cut off Gaza and surround it. I predicted that the aerial campaign would be followed by a slow, methodical ground offensive. I reported the IDF would give warnings to evacuate several times prior, but I did not specifically predict IDF would actually drop leaflets and make warning calls to Gazans and reportedly create a corridor for safe passage while Hamas reportedly attacked those trying to evacuate, if indeed that occurred or is still occurring. We've talked about Hamas tunnels, and I actually found a 2014 peer-reviewed article on that. Talked about small unit anti-armor techniques, Hamas use of human shields, ambulances, hospitals, and mosques for military operations. I told you would see images of children being pulled from the rubble, faces of despair, conflicting reporting, information and misinformation situations, hazards to journalists, total media control on the Israeli side. I reported Arab states would do nothing to help Gazans and would not even allow refugees into their countries. Moving forward, predictions now. Israel is going to move slowly and methodically on the ground and eventually claim victory in this war, and will stand up at least a security element occupying Gaza indefinitely. This is not going to be the United Nations peacekeeping force or security force. It's not going to be Arab. It's going to be Israeli. On the Israeli side, IDF and civilian casualty figures will continue to be underestimated and Hamas casualty figures overestimated. Flip-flop that for Hamas. Hamas will overestimate IDF and civilian casualty figures and underestimate Hamas casualty figures. You will continue to see calls for ceasefires, truces, diplomatic solutions. Here's an important prediction I'm going to make. Hezbollah will attempt a spectacular terror attack in Israel. The Salafist Sunnis and Shia in Lebanon and Syria, once at each other's throats, won't collaborate well in a united effort against Israel in the North Front, and they will continue to suffer casualties. Yemen is very close to being a failed state and has been reported to be in a most dire humanitarian crisis for about a decade. The Houthis in Yemen cannot muster any support, much less impactful support for Palestine. Jordan and others will continue to refrain from permitting refugees entry into those countries, except at the previously reported rate of about 500 per day into Egypt. Egypt was a disaster zone while we were there last year. They can barely keep their lights on. We had people try to hand their babies to us. That's how desperate they are. Saudi Arabia is still probably contemplating bombing Libya more and cutting up an opposition journalist. No ships in the 2 U.S. carrier battle groups have reported significant attacks against them. All will be fine for U.S. forces if they keep their heads on a swivel, force protection-wise, unless Biden decides to put U.S. troops on the ground anywhere for peacekeeping or security missions, at which time they will experience combined arms and terror attacks nearly daily. Israel is a nuclear power. Israel will not use nukes. There will be little to no further spillover, and so far what has happened has been less significant than the Arab Spring. Also, this is far from the Lebanese Civil War of 1975 to 1990. Those youngsters who think what's going on in Gaza now is the worst thing ever don't realize the area's barbarism that prevented Beirut from becoming the Riviera of the Mediterranean, and it wasn't just Israel's fault. Scott Ritter will continue to be wrong, but he's wrong by design. He's putting out information someone is telling him to put out. Another thing I'm exploring is the variance between a person who claims to be politically liberal or socialist and one who believes in and supports liberalism from an international relations perspective. I would think a liberal, and more especially a socialist, would support liberalism and agree with the United Nations creation of the states of Israel and Palestine. But it seems to me like most suffer from TikTok-induced collective illusion and don't really know what to believe in except